Banania. Nerds in Paradise. The Digibeet team was sitting out on the Manta Ray Bay Resort patio, watching the sun sink slowly behind the horizon, setting the Caribbean world aglow with colours that your average photo lab would ferociously correct as being physically impossible. They sat in blissful silence, or would have done had it not been for Connor O'Connor, the co-founder and marketing manager, insisting that they all listen to his latest plan to promote the company and make them all rich. He insisted to nobody in particular that they just can't have one range of products, but need to diversify significantly in order to increase their market share. And what product would seem applicable to initiate this diversity, you might ask? Which of course nobody did. Well, as it happens, I've been tinkering with one of my favourite products. I thought that was alcohol, sneered Paige Payne of customer support. Well, as a matter of fact, it does contain a small modicum of locally distilled beverage. I call it Connor's Cocktail. Now, how does that sound to yourselves? But hang on, hang on, broke in co-founder and chief engineer Nigel Nickleby, suddenly awake and involved. What kind of diversity is that? It's got nothing to do with the horticultural implements we develop, or any other kind of high-tech equipment at all. Oh, well, that's just it, protested Connor. Nobody will be expecting us to diversify into recreational beverages, now will they? We'll be launching something new and unexpected, so we would. But by this time, of course, even Connor had started to run out of steam, and he settled down again to enjoy his own particular cocktail of rum, coconut water, fresh mango and soursop juice, and some specially selected spices known only to himself. Oh, and more rum, just in case of evaporation, you understand. Well, everyone else just continued to enjoy the pleasant evening breeze and the soft lapping of the ocean against the beach. After all, it had been a particularly hectic and physically demanding day. The problem had started some days ago as Kees van der Dorp sat perusing the contract the company, Digibeet, had signed with the Bananian government. Kees, being particularly gifted when it came to sifting small print, had discovered a slightly discomforting clause. Not only must they stay and work on the island of Banania for 6 consecutive months, but the company must actually own property and their own transportation. Well, the transportation had been fairly easy to buy, though perhaps not quite up to the standard they had hoped. An ex-taxi bus was the only vehicle they could find that they could all fit in, and then leave some room over for baggage. It would take them a little longer, though, to find a real estate agent who would sell them what appeared to be the only vacant house on their side of the island. Charmingly located on a piece of hillside land outside the town, a delightful rustic property radiating old world charm. Well, it all sounded a little too good to be true, especially considering its very reasonable price. It all began to make a little more sense, though, when they actually drove up to this delightful rustic property in a newly acquired, not new but in good condition, rattly old bus. The delightful rustic property was actually a minuscule chattel house. That is a small, movable, 2-room wooden house with outhouse, that field labourers once occupied. And this certainly gave tiny houses a new meaning. But it was the only house for sale near to Manta Ray Bay. So everybody else decided that as founders and directors, Nigel and Connor should have the honour of living in the house and thereby fulfilling the contract, while the rest of the team stayed on at Manta Ray Bay Resort. So let's return to the evening after the team had moved Nigel and Connor into their new residence and were relaxing on the Manta Ray Bay Resort's patio. At that moment, they thought that life just couldn't get any better. When it didn't. The gentle lapping sound of the waves turned into a low-pitched humming, and a creaking and a rattling and a croaking which soon reached an almost deafening intensity. The insects had woken up, and every insect on the island seemed bent on making its presence felt on this particular patio. While reaching for his drink, Connor recoiled in horror as he saw that his glass had been inhabited by a whole colony of assorted insects, all vying for a sip of his drink. Every insect seemed miraculously drawn to Connor's cocktail, with one of the early comers leaving the party flying backwards in an interestingly zigzag flight path. Well, at least somebody likes your booze, Connor, chimed up Kate from the door to the bookkeeper, but Connor was not in the least amused. Ah, that's it, those thieving little bugs. This gobbled up half me drink, and without paying nothing. We've got to do something about it. You're all very clever, so think of something. And not only did they do thinking, but experimenting they did too. First, a bank of giant rotating fans were mounted on the edge of the patio to repel any insect bold enough or foolish enough to get too close. This unfortunately also had the effect of sucking up anything that happened to be behind it, then propelling it at high speed across the beach and into the ocean. In the case of the team, this included hats, spectacles, and pretty well anything else that wasn't actually nailed down. Well, several other insect repellents and bug zappers were created and subsequently dismissed, until somebody remembered reading about the ecological disaster that threatened rainforests everywhere, the dramatically decreasing number of insects. And so eventually the bug Trappist was created. This consisted of an enormous funnel with a laser spotlight cleverly mounted inside and a slowly rotating fan at its mouth. The idea was that if insects would be attracted by the light, the fan would then suck them through into a large container mounted below it. Because of the intense white light, it was difficult to hide what they were doing during the test phases, especially because the beam was visible from pretty well outer space. Of course, the neighbouring and habitually hostile Euphonians came to take a closer look, and when they did, they witnessed a huge column of insects swarming and dancing in the warmth of the light beam. The horrified Euphonian agents of the Euphonian Intelligence and Educational Involvement Organization, or the EIEIO, who had been dispatched by their boss, Boris MacDonald, to gather intelligence on this ominous phenomenon, naturally assumed that this was a secret biological weapon designed to inflict dangerous insects upon brave but helpless Euphonian troops. As they stumbled away, temporarily blinded by staring at the dazzling light, these hapless agents literally stumbled upon two more people who had a professional interest in the experiment. These were Robbie and Bobby, two very neatly dressed American businessmen without any noticeable business at all, and the local people noticed this with interest. Nobody was of course particularly worried about the fact that they may be spies for the CIA, but everybody darkly suspected that they were really Mormon missionaries. They too were blinded, but maybe a little more than temporarily, seeing as they had attempted to use night goggles to get a better view of the searing white light. So it was a sadly missed photo opportunity as four blinded intelligence agents got to struggling and fighting, at times with their own partner and occasionally with the local shrubbery, until they eventually stumbled apart and went their separate ways. One, unfortunately, into the marina's slightly less than welcoming waters. A while later, two team members, courageous Larry Lemming and cautious Fritz Van Dam, were designated to take the filled container up to the rainforest in the company's new rattly old bus. There they would deposit the insects in their new habitat, then make a hasty getaway before the insects actually realized where they were. Getting rid of a large container of agitated insects proved to take a little longer than anticipated, so night was fast approaching as they returned to the bus and slammed the back doors shut. So intent were they on starting their journey home that they neglected to notice the troop of little wild monkeys stowed away in the back of the bus. Interestingly, the back of the bus also contained quite an amount of Connor's cocktail, which he had insisted on producing anyway in spite of an overwhelming lack of enthusiasm. The libation was not yet bottled, but sat sullenly fermenting in large production containers. Well, as you might imagine, production container security caps were no match for a troop of determined monkeys, who quickly unfastened the top of the containers, and after not too long, the back of the bus was inhabited by a riotous mob of inebriated little primates. The monkeys were kicking up such a racket that Larry and Fritz became aware of their boisterous cargo long before they got anywhere near to town. And by the time they'd stopped at a convenient place, they'd no problem ejecting their uninvited passengers, who were, by this time, unable to even stand up, let alone offer any resistance. In the morning, the unfortunate primates awoke to brain-searing sunlight and mouths inhabited by innumerable sand-covered camels. Worst of all, they were a long, long, weary way from home. Well, it took quite a while to get the smell of Connor's cocktail out of the bus, and until they did, it was constantly escorted by a squadron of curious and very hopeful insects. And from then on, if Connor insisted on concocting his cocktail, he would do that in the newly acquired privacy and convenience of his own sweet home. That was Banania. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or your favourite podcast provider. And for more information, visit bananiapodcast.com.